And that's why we're growing food after all, right? The whole point is to feed our families. So you've got to make your garden work for you, sort of like the grocery store where it has fresh lettuce when you need it. Today, I want to invite you into a way of gardening that is less about a single moment and more about an unfolding story. If you're new to gardening or you're just starting to find your rhythm, you might think it's all about planting once in the spring and then harvesting all summer, but it's so much more than that. In fact, today we're going to talk about how to keep your garden giving you food all year long, month after month, through something called succession planting. We're actually going to cover 3 techniques today. I'm going to teach you about succession planting, interplanting, and relay planting. And these aren't just techniques, they're like learning to dance with the seasons. And it's a way that you can sort of keep your garden alive and active all year long, learning to work with the seasons instead of against them. So let's talk about how to make your garden a living, breathing story today. So first, let's talk about succession planting. This is a concept I actually didn't know or understand when I first started gardening. And so here's the way I would approach it. When I would start my garden season in the spring, it would be a planting blitz. Weeks of craziness. I'm putting seeds everywhere, plants everywhere. The garden goes from nothing to massively filled in a matter of weeks. And then the plants develop. And inevitably, within about 3 months, my garden has died back. The harvest is over. The plants are done. And I put all that work in, and my garden only lasted a few months. And I feel like I've done something wrong. I'm a terrible gardener. All that hard work, and it just lasted like that long. What in the world? Can you relate? The thing with gardening is you have to be continually planting things. It's not a one and done situation. So when you get out in the spring and you plant your seeds, those are the seeds for things you're going to harvest in early summer. But if you want to harvest something in late summer, that means in early summer you've got to plant more seeds. And if you want to harvest something in the fall, that means in midsummer you've got to plant even more seeds. And if you want to grow in the wintertime, in the late fall, you've got to put in more seeds. So it's all about learning the rhythms and when and how to stagger your plantings so that your garden will give you food all year long. So imagine that you want to grow lettuce. Here behind me, you can see my beautiful lettuce growing. Now, if I only planted lettuce once, I would get a massive crop of lettuce, and then we would have no more lettuce for the year. So instead, what I want to do is plant a row of lettuce or a bed of lettuce, depending how much I want, and then repeat. In 2 weeks, I'm going to plant that much again, and then repeat. And in 2 more weeks, I'm going to plant more lettuce. And we're going to do this over and over all season long until it gets too hot to grow lettuce, and then we'll replace the lettuce with a different crop. But instead of planting it all in one swing, we want to spread it out through the season, and then we can harvest what we need as we need it, and the lettuce is going to be right on time to fit our family's food plan. And that's why we're growing food after all, right? The whole point is to feed our families. So you've got to make your garden work for you, sort of like the grocery store where it has fresh lettuce when you need it. Now, if the idea of planting things over and over is stressing you out a little bit, take a deep breath, because it doesn't have to be complicated. Just because we're adding steps to your plan doesn't mean they have to be complicated steps. It doesn't have to be complicated. This isn't scary. In fact, succession planting isn't something that a gardener even came up with. This is a method that really we find in nature. Let me tell you what I mean. If you walk outside and you visit any wild area, a meadow, a pasture, anywhere where the wildflowers grow, you'll notice that there's a rhythm to things. If you watch a space long enough, you'll start to find that not everything blooms at once. For example, here along my tree line, I like to forage for lots of medicinal things, and they don't all bloom all the time. So right now, our favorite thing to forage is honeysuckles right here behind me. We've been picking honeysuckles like crazy, making honeysuckle tea and honeysuckle jelly and all the things. But honeysuckles don't bloom all year long. I can't harvest honeysuckles in the dead of winter. And the same is true for your garden. It's a seasonal thing. And so it's learning to work with your land and with the weather and with the seasons instead of against them. Instead of fighting against these elements and trying to tame them to make your garden into what you want it to be, work with them. Figure out what grows in cool weather and plant those things when it's cool. Figure out what is going to thrive in the absolute heat of summer and plant a bunch of it in July. You've got to match your efforts to the rhythms of the way God designed nature and the way God designed our planet. And when you do that, things start to shift and change, and your plan will change, and it's less stressful, but your garden becomes more productive. So here's a good example of succession planting in action. In the early spring, I plant loads of radishes, but when it gets hot, they start to bolt or flower. This just means they're going to seed so that the radish can continue in a new generation because it's getting too hot, and the plant knows it's not going to thrive once it's this hot. So what I'm going to do is actually come in and harvest these radishes. Here you go. And they're probably going to be a little bitter, a little spicy because they have bolted, but that's all right. We're going to pull them up and we're going to take them in and use them the best we can. But we got to pull these out so we can put something in this spot that enjoys the heat. The radishes are not enjoying the temperatures. So instead, I'm going to come behind these and I'm going to pull my radishes out and I'm going to put bush beans here. Bush beans love summer heat. So this is an example of succession planting. My radishes have been in here for about 6 weeks. Now they're done. We're going to pull them out and we'll put bush beans in. Bush beans will be in here for probably 60, 70, 80 days. And then when they're done, there's another radish. When they're done, we will come in and follow those with something for fall. Maybe some leafy greens or something like that. Or even some squash, maybe a fall squash. So instead of thinking about this bed is the radish bed, well, it's the radish bed in April and in the beginning of May, but now it's going to be the bean bed. And then later this fall, it's going to be maybe the squash bed. So you are constantly rotating what's filling your beds according to the season and the timing, and just make sure they stay full. That's the biggest thing. Keep food growing in all the spaces all the time. Now let's talk a little bit about interplanting. So with succession planting, it was all about the timing, right? We plant one crop and then when it's done, we follow it up with a succession of something else. With interplanting, we're actually planting two things at the same time, even though they have different time frames. So for instance, here in this bed behind me, I have carrots and then I have some lettuce. Now, these are developing at different rates. The carrots are going to grow much slower than the lettuce. By the time the carrots are mature, the lettuce will be long gone from this bed. But because those carrots grow so slowly, they make a great interplant companion with my lettuce. And the carrots are growing mostly underground. The lettuce is growing mostly above the ground. And by the time the lettuce is done, there will be room for the carrot tops to expand. So I almost always plant carrots and lettuce together. They are a perfect interplanting pairing, but there are lots of others you can experiment with as well. You can try interplanting with lots of different combinations. Another fun one is with sunflowers because they get so tall. You could tuck lots of lettuce or scallions or carrots or radishes at the base of your sunflower. There's just endless opportunity with interplanting, but the main idea is make good use of your space and don't let any little bit of soil footprint go to waste. And then we have a method called relay planting, and this one is actually one of my favorites. It's sort of like a fun little high five between two garden buddies. So a perfect example here is you see my peas growing behind me. These are sugar snap peas. Look how pretty. So these peas are actually on the end of their life cycle right now. And it's starting to get warm, and peas don't generally do really well when the summer heat arrives. So we're harvesting the last of our peas, but I know that within another few weeks, it's going to be time to replace these because they're going to start to die back. So with relay planting, I don't wait for my peas to die before I plant something else here. instead, what I'm going to do is here at the base of my peas, I'm going to go ahead and sow seeds for my next crop. So in this case, I'm going to be putting whole beans here when these peas are done. So what I can do is go ahead and sow in my bean seeds at the base of my peas. Then by the time the peas have started to die back, my bean seeds will have sprouted and they will be ready to climb right behind the peas. So there's no waiting time, there's no dead time where nothing is growing. We immediately move from a pea crop to a green bean crop. And you can do this pretty successfully in a lot of different ways. So one thing to keep in mind when I do this, I won't fully uproot my peas when they're done. I will just cut them at the ground level and leave that root system in place. That will compost down and do great things for the soil. And that way I don't, risk bothering my baby beans that are growing underneath. So relay planting, it's a fun way to kind of get ahead on the next succession that's coming in and get your seeds in before the last ones are finished. So give relay planting a try too. So why do these methods really even matter? Well, ultimately, because it's helping you make the most of your space. And if you are trying to pump the maximum amount of food out of your garden, whether it's big or small, using these techniques like succession planting and intercropping and relay planting, these are going to do huge things for how abundant your harvest is by the end of the year. So don't be afraid to change it up this year and learn some tricks and some hacks to make this simpler. And try succession planting your garden this summer, and you are going to be absolutely stunned at the difference in how productive your garden will be with a little extra strategy and planning. All right, let's get into some specifics of some easy crops that you can try this with in your garden. So I'm going to walk you through a few options, and then you give this a try. All right, first, let's try a succession of arugula to zucchini to beets. So you're going to sow your arugula in the early spring, and then when it's finished, you're going to follow it with zucchini in the summer, and then when the zucchini is done for late summer into early fall, you're going to plant beets. Arugula to zucchini to beets. That's one plan. Here's another fun trio to try. Start with lettuce in the spring, and when it's done, put in bush beans and grow green beans in the summer. And when those are done, replace them with fall spinach. So we're going lettuce to beans to spinach. That's another good option. What if you start with radishes in the spring, and then you go to cucumbers in the summer, and then let's say you don't want to grow anything in that space in the fall, and so you cover crop it. We'll talk about cover cropping in a future week, but cover cropping is where you just plant some sort of beneficial plant over the ground to keep it covered, because remember, soil does not like to be naked. It is modest and it will cover itself. If you don't cover it with something, it will cover itself with weeds. So cover cropping prevents that from happening, plus it can benefit the soil underneath. So that might be another option. You can always rotate in a cover crop if you're not wanting to harvest like an edible crop at a certain time of year. And there's nothing wrong with that. Not everybody wants to grow food 12 months a year. Maybe you want a break in the winter. There's nothing wrong with that. If you grow enough in the spring and summer and fall, you can take that break without any guilt and still have fresh food to eat because of the work you've already done. So there you go, y'all. Succession planting, interplanting, and relay planting. We've covered them all. And they're not just ways to grow food. They're ways to grow a relationship with your garden. Your garden isn't a single moment. It's a story. And remember, you are the storyteller. Every seed you plant is a sentence. Every harvest is a chapter. And these techniques we're talking about today keep you writing all season long. Start where you are. Maybe try a little succession planting with some arugula or some carrots or some lettuce. Trust me, the garden will meet you there. You do not have to be afraid of making mistakes because it's all an experiment and it's all a way we learn. So don't be afraid to have a little fun with it. This is your permission to play in your garden. Write a story that makes you happy as you design your garden layout. And remember that even the best stories have changing chapters. And a story would be boring if it was one character all the way through. So give your garden a constantly changing cast of characters and add a little drama, add a little fun to the plot, and you never know what'll happen. Each garden is a new story and a new year. So design it well, have fun writing your garden story, and we can't wait to see it grow.